Academy.
And is a definite addition. We see one of the initiatives that we run is Visit New Haven, which promotes the 15 towns of the region for tourism. And in thinking about how we capture and the spend of tourists and continue to invest in that, maintaining that piece of character and quality is really important. And so in viewing the responses to this particular proposal, I want to start by saying it's important to note exactly what these responses are. As an expression of interest, this is an indication from the market for what types of uses the private sector thinks would be a compelling match for this opportunity. It's important to note what it isn't, which is a real chance to compare the meat of different proposals side by side. These are indications of the direction that these developers would like to go. But the specificity, for example, of their floor plans or of some of their pricing is not the level that I would recommend holding for an RFP or a formal consideration. But it's important to note what you're not hearing, which is there have not been proposals for medical care facilities, for commercial office space, for lab space in this setting.
We have those in other places.
There's quite a few and quite a bit of interest. What you are hearing is two different directions that you can go in comparing for on-site housing. What's remarkable in all three of these on-site housing proposals, they are largely dependent upon historical tax credits. I would say that the strength of this is that this is a prime building to be well matched for that. I think you have clear experience understanding the costs that the historical nature of this building brings with it. It is, however, a point of exposure of the project. Both of the proposals that rely heavily on historical tax credits assume receiving the full amount of this federal historical tax credits while proposing additions or changes to the building that may or may not be permitted through that regulatory process. And so my recommendation is that the next step of this group be to have a formal set of questions that are shared with each of these respondents that share more details about the particular limits, the confrontation with reality of things like the septic needs of the building, potential remediation costs of the building, as well as the physical limits of changes to the building. And this is realizing that a change of an amenity may not be possible in the financing structure or regulatory approval of the historic conditions. The other thing to compare is that while we have several floor plans to compare back and forth, that the selection between the count of the units really is a decision that I think any of these developers would be happy to amend or adjust if there was a preference for more 2 bedrooms or more studios. The low count had several 1 bedrooms and multiple 2 bedrooms. The high unit count was mostly studios with some 1 bedrooms. What we're seeing is that the pricing of this is fairly consistent with what we see as market rate, with the subsidy that would be possible through the low income housing tax credit through the state. Now that program does tend to reward or push for higher levels of participation for workforce or affordable housing components. And in what I think is by far the most complete proposal, there's about 60% affordable designation through the low income housing tax credit program. What that means is that one of the decisions before you, as you look to consider housing or hotels, is what level of affordable targets you want to set for this project. Some of those do have an impact on things like local spend. They also have a tremendous impact on the financing options that are available for the developers. So choosing a higher number does allow for more support, and the Department of Housing will be a clear partner with this. One other direction, though, if you are interested in lower levels of affordable housing, would be to be talking with the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority that has a range of powers for other ways of funding this project. One thing that I will note, and this is, I think, representative of the stage at which these developers are at these expressions of interest, is that multiple of them made reference to participating in government programs that are not necessarily eligible for this project. So programs like the Community Investment Fund from DECD. There's also several references to tax increment financing districts, which I believe are not currently established, nor may be the best fit for this type of project. So as you're considering housing, some things to consider are the comparables within the district for property tax income. In looking at that, Some of the multifamilies definitely show higher rates of property tax contribution than some single family. What I would encourage to consider is some of the comparables on Main Street, though. So buildings like the Aerodome building or the intersection of Route 1 and Wall Street, both of which are contributing about $100,000 a year. And on a per acre basis could put this between $100,000 and $150,000 a year in revenue. Depending upon how you want to approach the financing or the actual disposition of the deal, you might be looking at a tax abatement on that amount. But in comparing it to other uses, the hotel proposal, as they point out, and we'll commend their work for the economic impact appendix, there are higher rates of local tax property revenue than just for housing. Looking at the comparable, in the high end, the Madison Beach Hotel pays approximately $200,000 a year in taxes. I'm sure you're both aware and appreciative of. Looking at a per acre basis, that use for hotels in this site would likely be more productive in tax revenue. However, also includes a large amount of additional work and development on site. Looking at the market for hotels in partnership with the Connecticut Lodging Association that also took a look in conversation with us about the local hotel market, there's definitely demand for additional units. The 34 units on site at the Madison Beach Hotel are not enough for the events and weddings and things that they hold. They're already partnering with overflow spaces, many of which are at a different price point and for a different market. This very much seems in conversation with that property for the price point. Their assumption of $500 average daily revenue is ambitious and going for a luxury market. That is, however, recognizing the seasonal nature of hotel pricing. And so, for example, this week at Madison Beach Hotel, you could probably get a room for just a little bit under $300 a night. That is likely going to be upwards of $800 to $1,000 a night throughout most of the summer. And so realizing the cyclical nature for their projections, the projections of occupancy are very close and actually a little bit below what we've been seeing in occupancy for this last year. The assumptions that people had for what was going to be happening with our tourism and hospitality market were somewhat pessimistic for this year. We've actually been outperforming those rates. Currently, our hotel occupancy is off by about 1 point from where we were this time last year, which is performing much better than I think most people expected. However, what we have seen is that the hotel construction market was sharing that pessimism. So we've actually had the lowest rate of addition of new hotel rooms in years, with 31 built. And that does mean that the capitalization rate for hotel investments is higher. Investors are demanding a larger return. So it's currently about 9.1% return on investment for hotel development. And I bring that up because it is important to note that the hotel proposal does include the town's contribution of $8 million as a limited partner in the project. The rates that they're offering or proposing are a little bit above market. And I would say that this is something worth exploring in your roles, both as the long-term owners of this property and the land, but also as a potential investor. And as you consider that direction, I think it is worth considering both the hotel concept and participation as a limited partner as linked but separate decisions. And examining the opportunity for a hotel on site, according to this current proposal, really is a critical need to have the expanded capacity of the additional building. So the second piece that I would note is importantly about this proposal is it does expand out from the current building of about 55,000 square feet to 95,000 square feet plus parking. And it's definitely the most intensive of the proposed uses. So as you're looking at that, there may be a basic market need for that scale in order to justify the overhead and operating costs of the build. It is also a much pricier build going for a luxury model and market. And if you are considering a hotel concept, there may be additional types of markets or concepts that you want to consider alongside that. And so my recommendation is what you've learned from this proposal is the types of use that market developers and investors are seeing as relevant, and that pursuing those on the basis of proving the pro formas for the actual costs that will be involved would be a good next step through sharing a consistent questionnaire with what the town knows about those costs with each of these developers. If at this point there was a clear decision to preclude one of these uses from consideration, this as a concept could be the time to discuss that. But exploring how you want to learn about what might be possible within each of these different use cases would be likely more important than dialing in on a particular developer's proposal for an amenity, for example. Because if there is a strong preference that you would like a roof deck or a marketplace instead of a paddle court or a wellness studio, I believe each of these developers would be happy to respond to those different proposals and needs. But it's important to understand and ensure that you're not precluding with the physical components of the building or the financing structure you're using any of those uses. So on the basis of that, I'm happy to work with the town to help develop that questionnaire and can provide additional market data as might be helpful to this body in making that decision. But that is our first set of responses. The overall, this is at the level of expression of interest is pointing in a direction. I will say some of these proposals were much more complete than others. And ultimately, it will be your decision once you've just really honed in on the concept to determine the team that you want to work with on the basis of their experience and participation in the process. But I'm open to questions now, or happy to talk afterwards if that'd be helpful.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for that. I thought that was very insightful and very helpful to get your perspective and the proposals. I think it was very helpful. And I guess this was kind of a unique process we went through. I think we're all used to RFPs, right? Very targeted. And my thought was if we're going to go back and do this second, bring actual groups in, get our questions answered in a more detailed basis. Would we then, if we say we picked hotel or say we picked housing, right? We wouldn't be picking a specific group necessarily, we'd be picking a concept, right? So would we then go out to a full RFP if the town then decided, and I know we still have to talk demolition as well, right? There's really 3 different ideas here, housing, demolition, and hotel. To get to that granularity, because I know a lot of people are saying the price points in here don't match what we saw as a community, right? We went out to bid and received bids in at $24 million. And that was just keeping the classrooms the same size, right? Not a lot of walls were taken down. There were not a lot of
a bathroom in every room.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, and I think, so that's where, there has to be that next level. So if we were to say we picked housing, just for an example, would we then decide, okay, what we want that housing to look like, and then do an RFP so that the people that did respond this time could then participate in a much more detailed way? Or have you seen these kinds of processes play out like that? We're not committed to this group. We're grateful for them because they gave us a really good sign of what we think is feasible, right? And attractive in the market. So just your thoughts on that. Have you kind of seen that more multi-step process before?
Yeah, so the expression of interest phase is very much seeing what's out there. And I don't know if you would have expected to have someone come to you and say, we want you to invest in a hotel as the solution to what this property might be. And this process and the step in the process exists for that reason. I will say there's more detail because you've gone through these previous phases in this expression of interest than in others that makes it feel farther along in the process. And for that reason, I would say the encounter with reality that the costs of the full construction, remediation, septic system, et cetera, for this building will likely need to be done before you want to do that RFP phase. And so some of that will be that in this questionnaire, I think it's important to literally create a grid and compare people's plans for the septic system across the different uses and scales so that they can have a real understanding of whether or not these things pencil out from what they had thought or expected.
But to be fair, all of that information is already public.
Mm-hmm.
That was available to
with a particular concept, though.
Septic is the need for a septic is
5-bedroom house is different than a 10-bedroom house in terms of a septic.
Yes, but a septic system that is inoperable means a new septic system.
Yeah, fair.
So anybody going into this would have known that they were going to start from scratch on that. But I just want to come back to your idea and focusing in on process. I'm not sure. are you saying that we would say pick the hotel name and then say, hey, anybody who wants to give us an RFP for a hotel, come on in?
Well, I think that, you know, it's easier conversation with housing, right? Because I think the bigger conversation is, does the town want affordable housing there or not, right? So people put forward proposals. We might all agree housing might be the more sure path, right? But because it's something we're familiar with, I think we have a better understanding of how housing would work there. We went through that process back in 2017. I would think, though, we'd rather than narrow down exactly what we want. I'm sure some of the proposers might consider changing their mix, right? They might put more market rate in if they know the town wants that. So I guess I was thinking if we pick housing, we should then, what do we want for housing? Right? And then we as a board with public input, say, this is the housing proposal that we're offering.
But is there
Okay.
ever a scenario, and maybe this is more for you, but is there a scenario that suggests we could ask all four to come back, given that there was 4 expressions of interest,
Mm.
and just tailor the questions to those 4, as opposed to going down the housing path or the hotel path? I guess that would be my preference, if I had that
I
option.
don't feel ready to pick housing
Yeah,
versus
nor do I.
hotel, right?
So-
And I would like that next step.
I'm
to
just trying to
do-
clarify that.
Yeah, I'm talking about after that, so we
have
set the stage,
Organizations that took the time to respond.
right?
I think part of me feels it would be a little unfair to turn around, having
Yeah.
seen this, and then going back out to the
Yeah,
development
totally.
community and saying,
Yeah.
anybody else want a second bite of
Right.
the apple? I think we should at least respect that
These 4.
these 4 took the time to respond. And not necessarily go to the Marriott group and said, hey, you guys want to put in a proposal for a hotel? I think that would be,
Piss off John.
it just,
Well,
no, John is, he doesn't care.
Well, no,
Term, it's a fall.
I guess we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I'm thinking beyond the next presentation where we're gonna be looking at. Cause neither of us, you know, I think everybody thinks the hotel is really exciting and interesting and fun, and you can get excited about that. I think that's, the feasibility piece is hard, right? So I think we definitely need to understand and get more information about that, the actual feasibility of it. And then I think we know
Well,
how.
there's a nuance in that one that's different than the other ones, which is the
Right.
town contribution.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother discussion, right? That's a very different path that, you know, and that's where what that hotel looks like, the financing will be driven by what the ultimate plan is for the hotel, right? There was a proposal put forward with a lot of amenities and ideas that had made some financing assumptions, so, but I feel like we need to get more information. Then, once we come back, we do need to pick a path, right? Housing, then if you feel that we should stick with the 3 and then have them come in with more specifics that we want on housing, or if we wanna go with the hotel, and take a deeper dive, we can do that. I'm just,
Or demo, I mean, to your point.
yeah, it's your
I
demo.
think
So
we have 3
that's where I'm
minutes.
kind of like, I'm thinking more beyond the next.
Well, and I think we're
Yeah,
meandering
Yeah.
through sort of our thought.
right, exactly.
So
This is
I appreciate
brainstorming
that.
right
We're
now.
not-
Yeah,
We're not kind of moving down
Some
the
of threats.
list per
Yeah.
se, where we're coming at it from all angles. I appreciate that this was an expression of interest and there wasn't that expectation for really fine-tuned financials. But some of the respondents chose to put numbers on paper, okay? And so the group that put $6.5 million down as a project cost.
I can't get past that.
I don't know what to do with that. They could have said, we'll figure it out, right? Which would have been appropriately fuzzy. But they chose 6.5 million. And given the history of the project, I don't even think, well, I don't know how to move past such a big mess, right? I mean, a private organization that came in and said, we can do it 20 million, right? Because the private sector can do it cheaper than the public sector, okay? I would accept a discount of some sort, but not down to that. And so now I'm left with, I don't know how to believe anything else that comes from them. They didn't have to put a number down, they put an extraordinarily low number on it. And should we entertain that conversation? any further.
In my view, since we have four, I think it's worth just, that's part of the question. Explain how you came up with a construction budget, or, what are unknowns there that would change that number? I think we can ask that to take that deeper level, only just because I feel like I think it's better to just, we got four, if we have like 10, then I think we gotta start weeding this out a little bit and getting it down to a more concise group for comparison. But I think it's just cleaner to just say, okay, did people, because expression of interest is a very vague concept and it's not typical, right? Let give them the benefit of the doubt that they have the opportunity to come back with sharpened pencil and expand their presentation by answering a list of questions.
But everybody had access to the same level of information.
Yeah.
That
I mean,
was the
I
24 million
think some
cost.
chose to
And
spend more
so
time.
I kind of hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think some chose to spend a lot more time and detail on putting a detailed proposal. We were talking about this earlier, I was talking to staff about it, like I used to do M&A, I used to run auctions for businesses. And we would get 10 bids on a company or something, and one would have a paragraph, right? And one would have a book. Right, they didn't submit. And oftentimes, depending on the dynamics, we would have that paragraph person come in because they wanted to be part of the process. They were like, we're not gonna,
They were up the whole time.
once we do our work, the problem is the other group spent all this time on an effort where they didn't really have all the information they needed, you know what I'm saying? So I think you weigh all that and try to come out with the best result. So like, to me, the goal here is to get the best result, right? For the town. So I don't see a downside in including everybody that responded back, that's all. I don't feel like I'm at a point where I'm gonna be to differentiate between any of them. So to me, it's better to have more ideas and more feedback when we have the presentations versus to isolate it to a smaller group, that's all.
It's just a process question. So maybe you may know this. When people respond to a expression of interest, is there ever like if you bring them back or you move to the RP or whatever, do they ever just drop out? Does that happen? Or maybe you-
Yeah, they might decide they don't, they could be listening to this meeting right now and say, you know
Bullshit.
what?
Yeah.
We got other higher probability projects that we want to dedicate our staff to, right? And that's also the equation. We set out a timeline, and some of these companies, maybe it didn't work well with their timeline. They had other stuff going on that they couldn't dedicate a lot of time, but they wanted to stay a part of the process. So they showed up for the walkthrough and they threw in, something quickly that they could put together to stay part of the dialogue. They could be watching this now and think, town doesn't know what they want. We're not gonna invest any more time in this, so,
I could be
that's the
swayed
rest
either
of the
way. I could be swayed either way. I could say, let's bring all four back. Or the $6 million one didn't hit the mark. With available, I mean, it was a referendum, didn't have the public
We have a
notice out
lot
there.
of
And there was a lot of information
information
on the website that was available, so. Was that just a swing and a miss, or do we just, I think I could convince either way, but,
If they came back and stuck to the guns and said, no, we know we can do it,
and here's why.
maybe I can start to respect that, but if they go, oh yeah, we thought about it, it's really 45 million.
Right.
Well, okay.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do with that. But since we're throwing a lot of balls up in the air all at the same time here, another one is, does the town know what it wants? And so we're kind of resetting the clock back to 2017. Where we're like, well, what is an acceptable use for this building? And where does that come in and meet up with this discussion? Where and how do we discern what the town of Madison, the residents of Madison today think is an acceptable use of that space?
yeah, since
I-
2017, we've heard we don't want housing. They didn't want housing at Academy, they didn't want housing at Island Avenue. We've heard we want an increase, revenue stream for the grand list. We've heard we want more restaurants, we want more community amenities. So, but these are things that we've been hearing since 2017, so how do we know now what people want?
So I think that is I think we need to, first of all, test if there's any other offsite demolition that are valid, right, and that will work. And that's what this next meeting to me is. It's validity, or is this really an option, right? Then I think we have to then go through a public hearing process to see the attractiveness. Eventually, anything has to get voted on by the
Mhm.
public, right?
Yeah.
This will get voted on by the public. To talk about this, though, we were in such a different place than we were. Look, the public 3 years ago said they wanted to spend, $16 million on a community center, and then we came back and said, we're gonna bond $16 million, but we're gonna have to spend more on it. I think there was a change in view. They didn't want to bear the burden of the costs anymore. There was an opinion change. I think housing is a very different conversation now than it was in 2017, and that's one of the reasons we started this expression of interest. We have an affordable housing committee. We have people in our own strategic plan coming saying we want more housing choices, right? We want more options for people for downsizing. So, maybe the feedback will be that we don't want affordable housing there, it's in our downtown, but maybe we want something serving those empty nesters that want to stay in Madison, but they want something comfortable and, walking to downtown. And so maybe we're gonna hear that we're okay with housing if it serves what we want in town, right? So, I don't know. It's not an easy discussion, but I think, I guess we take this incrementally, right? Let's go to the next thing, because the next meeting in December, I would argue, having them come back, we might be able to say, this is, I just don't think this is viable, and we can eliminate some of that. And it could be that we're, and then we'll go to the public, and I think we have some sort of public meeting, process to decide if we're gonna proceed to the next level.
And I think it's important too, as part of this process, to have an understanding of what kind of securities do we have as a town? I think about the market. I mean, even on New Road, I think we have an entire plot cleared that nothing's happened with because the lease fell through. What kind of securities would any of these development opportunities offer us as a town, so we don't just end up with a big hit
Empty building.
in the hole in the middle of the town? There needs to be,
Yeah.
so,
Or vacant building.
we've got one asking us for $8 million, but what are you giving us as a security that you're gonna do this project?
I think in order to advance this discussion, we need to educate ourselves and the public by preparing a list of questions and learning more from these four. We may discover, the public, we may discover that it's very promising or that it doesn't feel right at all. So I guess I'm of the mind that we should move ahead with all four, prepare a list of questions with whatever resources we have available to help us and take that next step. I don't see any harm in doing that. And I think it's an educational step for everybody in this community to learn some more. Ken, the events of 2017, as you well described, I think the public was not ready for those housing proposals and didn't care for the ones we got. But I think times have changed and these proposals look different to me. And so, to me, there's a lot of new information here. I'd like to learn more.
Well, I think in fairness too, back in 2017, the housing proposals were on 5.2 or whatever the total parcel
That's
of
right.
the lot was, as opposed to we're saying, no, it's the footprint of the building. And oh, by the way, I think the one common thread that we've talked about many, many times is revenue generating. And I think that's something that, we need to be thinking about here is, I think we heard loud and clear from the public that we don't want a cost.
So, but just the nuance on that, the folks, the organizations that responded said the only way for us to make it work economically is if we have the whole parcel.
Mhm.
It wasn't, they want the whole parcel.
In 17 or now?
In 17,
Yeah.
yeah. So they needed the whole thing to make it work.
Right.
And the public resisted that too, by the way. We heard a loud outcry that, we don't want that.
Well,
And
but
that was just
to,
a
but
different real estate
to,
market.
but to everybody's
It was a very
point
different real
that,
estate
And open space.
Yeah.
It was open space.
right, but to everybody's point that today's a different day, maybe the public doesn't feel that way anymore. Maybe we should put the whole parcel on the table. In for a penny, in for a pound. I mean, we can't say that parts of what we heard in 17 are valid and
Fair
parts
comment.
of what we heard in 17 aren't valid. they either have meaning or they don't, so.
The challenge with that point is, I mean, hate to bring it up, it's our town green. And once you put it out there and allow somebody to take it over or purchase it versus a land lease, we lose our town green forever.
Well, I mean,
So I guess I'm not in favor of that, but
Argument could be made for allowing for development
yeah,
on a
it would be on a,
99-year lease.
Yeah, it's on
Where
land lease.
it's,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah, but
these
it's not 99
generations
years.
that don't
It's-
have access to
No
it.
revenue
It's a
generating.
footprint, though, that has always been tied up in a building, right? For 100 years. It's not green space that we're taking away. We don't, it's been a building. I mean, look, I mean, this is always the conundrum with this, right?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
And I think, you know, everybody recognizes that there isn't a silver bullet here. But I think that what I heard from the referendum was that people are just concerned about costs, right? Because the community center was just, there was bonding, which people seemed open to supporting at one point, but there was those carrying costs, right? That was gonna be there as an ongoing thing. As we've learned through the last 5 years, facilities cost money, right? Either whether they're gonna be closing facilities or whether they're new facilities. And there's a carrying cost of that, there's a staff cost, and I think the community center, the benefit of the community center was this economic development component that we were. So that's where I look at, like, the hotel does that, and you even pointed, it's more tax revenue, right? So and then it's gonna spill into all the other businesses downtown. What's different about this building versus Jeffrey, it's downtown. Right? So that's where we've always been like, why would we have more green space downtown? We need to be driving economic activity and make our town continue to thrive and have amenities that our residents want, right? So, and does a hotel do that? I don't have the answer for that right now, but that's why I think that's a very exciting idea, because it's something that is gonna drive, you know, gonna drive activity and generate revenue for us. So that's where it's, I think, but I don't
agree.
know
If you're
enough to
looking for an
dismiss
economic
it either.
engine, I think that the
Yeah,
hotel
and,
is,
you know.
is clearly the only one that fits that
Yeah.
bill. I guess where I started this conversation was, soliciting reaction out of the public, and I think the sooner we get the idea that conceptually, developers are interested in either making it into some form of residence, subsidized or otherwise, or a hotel option. Conceptually, is there any version of a hotel, Madison, that you could support? Is there any version of housing that you could support? A lot of details to be worked out, but if we were to hear loud and clear, look, a hotel's off the table, we just don't want that in town.
Right.
Then I'm not sure there's a lot of value in going down that avenue. Certainly not a lot of value in asking company to put together detailed proposals
Right.
for it. And the same goes true for the housing, right? That there's no point in traveling down. And I think not having that, we would have to say to these respondents, in good faith, we don't know if the public will accept this. Don't know if this is what the public wants. So
Gotta vote.
do this with that knowledge, eyes wide open.
Yeah, that's an
But I
important.
remember back in 2017, we did that, when we did bring in the developers, right? And there was sort of that open Q&A
Mhm.
with the public, with the developers. So there was sort of that presentation, come showcase your idea. So maybe that's what we do in this case, and have a dialogue so that there's the conversation that you're sort of referring.
So
But
Peggy and I were
it's-
talking a little bit about this, and I think, a lesson learned from that was having proposals delivered cold to the audience. Once that audience galvanized around a particular perspective, it was hard, or if not impossible, to move them. So I don't think I would recommend we just put
Throwing it
these
to the
guys
wolves.
up on the stage and saying, hey, here's your chance and see what the crowd says. I
So we have a presentation round
Yeah.
first with us, answering the questions.
give people a chance to
Yep.
process.
Process it, and then we do an open kind of town Q and A.
And maybe we offer.
And maybe not all, maybe we decide not all.
I'm just brainstorming now, but if the public wants to email us questions that we should maybe include in our question list.
Fair.
Doesn't mean we're gonna include them all, but there might be some people out there that have expertise in
Yeah.
these areas that might say you really need to do
We
this.
have a lot of smart
Yeah.
people in this
Yeah,
town with
so
a lot of
email-
varied experiences. I think
Email the
that's a
board
good
of
idea.
selectmen, just say, I suggest you ask these questions, and we'll try to put together something that is focused, because we can't expect these people who have already invested time, right? To go forward, right? But at the same point, if we're like, no, this is legitimate, this would be very helpful, we would all like to know this too. I think that would be worth adding to it, so.
So do we want to talk about any lines in the sand? We've talked,
Like calendar.
no, like restrictions that we would put on any further, proposal work. We've talked about no land, right? The footprint of the building. We've talked about, not
At least not.
not owning the land. I'm still not a big fan of it, but we've talked about it. Do we want to draw hard lines, and say, look, moving forward, your proposal can't include any more space, or it can, and we're open to hearing it. I guess what I'm trying to say is
Yeah.
set some fences.
I think that, like, the way this was written, because I think there's conversations about the existing parking lot. And, some of the space where if you had to,
Get the septic.
yeah, and change configuration a little bit or add an extension. I know one of them had proposed a very large addition. But, how that would impact the athletic fields. Does it have to be those two fields? Like, does it, do they have to remain in existence? And even the other plan, the community center was gonna reconfigure, I think, one of the ball fields to accommodate the septic, and then we had to move the playground, right? So there was some site amendment changes that had to be, but that's very different than saying, can you build out over all this, these two ball fields and take them over, so.
If we're
Yeah.
building fences, the
Yeah.
first set of fences are already built with the EOI. So if you're gonna set as a guideline now, oh, you can move the playground. Technically speaking, that's not really fair, because you could have had another vendor out there that would have said, oh, if I knew you could move the playground, that changed everything for me, I would have done that. So
So your starting point is what we could already play.
you're stuck, so
But it was
Right,
a
but we
little
didn't invite a
vague.
48,000 square foot building expansion.
correct,
you know?
that would be something that you could determine after the fact. You
Right.
kept the pool open for all these ideas, but we said, don't buy, you're not buying the land, and you're not touching the ball fields, those types of things. So everybody, the marketplace digested that, and certain people said, okay, I could do that within those parameters. You
Yeah.
asked for ideas, you could absolutely exclude and say, hey, we
We can
don't
add
want
that.
additions. Exactly, procurement's a funnel, like I was saying before, like, you started up here, these are your general ideas, you could narrow those down further. But you don't want to really go the opposite direction and say, well, yes, you can do something that we did it, because you expressly said the athletic fields remain as is, those are off the table. So you could get more restrictive,
Well.
but you would actually be getting less restrictive in
Right.
that sense.
Well, so I guess though, I look at this as preserving adjacent athletic fields, right? That doesn't mean that, if there's like a shifting around, like what they were gonna do with the community center, flipping the diamonds, right? So that you actually gain a little bit more space for whatever you need for parking.
Yeah, then we
whatever.
would have worded it differently
Yeah.
in the OI though.
Yeah.
Because in construction,
Yeah.
preserve means
Yeah.
you leave where it is as
Yes,
is.
okay, but I guess, like, I'm just saying that,
Because that's a cost center.
there's a goal there, right? But as we learned at the community center, you have to like make some modifications to try to achieve that. Did you want to add something, or are you just nodding?
Yeah, no, I just want
Yeah.
to jump in on one
Yeah.
concept, which is
Yeah.
very much to what extent you're using this next step to standardize and create an apples to apples comparison between these proposals. Because to your point, it is indicative of the time and effort that these proposers put in, those that are complete and consider these different components. If that is the standard to which you're held, though, several of these may simply not be relevant. At the other time, you have creative proposals particularly for the hotel, that do have new additions like a completely new building, expanded parking, or $8 million in town money. And so for this next step of the process, if your goal is to get the best proposal from each of these teams to consider side by side, I think it is worthwhile to articulate to all of the parties which of those components are open. If you are considering projects that would include a $40,000 square foot additional structure, then several of these proposals might meaningfully benefit from including that
I would
option as well.
imagine.
Yeah,
I would imagine, yeah,
so
significantly.
so creating that standard, and I would say if you are considering these side by side, to provide those opportunities to consider them, because the creative additional submission of those proposed ideas is something beyond necessarily what.
So maybe what we should do is draft up this question thing, right? And then at our next meeting, finalize what we want them to respond to, so we can kind of think, but it's a lot of, I'm still trying to process this. I want to go back and read how it was worded, what some of the plans had too, because I'm trying to like envision what was there, it was different, and how it impacted this site, right? And then, we could, pick a date in December and say, okay, and just notify the 4 proposers that, the plan would be, you would be coming and presenting your proposal, and we're gonna send you a question list after, when's our next meeting? Just to finalize that question list. Well, we can do it via, I don't know how formal you wanna make that list, like,
As
just,
long as we can arrive at some sort of consensus
Yeah.
on what a complete question list is, I think.
Yeah, because our next meeting is the 24th of November. That's our Monday evening meeting.
yeah, and I think if we, so we can do, I mean, if you're comfortable doing this via email and just everybody sharing thoughts and suggestions, leaving it to myself and Michael perhaps and Ben to finalize what that is, to make sure that we're being, concise, fair,
Consistent.
and also not overly burdensome, to be honest. I mean, I just want a way that,
You don't wanna
Yeah.
put 50 questions out
Yeah.
there, they're not gonna have time
Yeah.
to make the presentation.
But, and I would say if the public had, as an expert in these areas, feel free to share those thoughts with us, and we'll look at those and see if they make sense and rise to the level of what we want from this next stage, right? Then I would think we would target, like the second week of December, maybe, to have them come in. We would pick a date and do, public presentation.
Good with that.
Does that timeline work then? So then if we'll do it like, but we want to give them a little time, we got Thanksgiving in there for them to prepare, and I mean, we could. What is today? 13th, I mean, we could do target the first week of December, if we can get this question list done early next week, but I think.
I'm not sure that's
give
fair.
At least 2
No,
weeks. and it's
That's not fair to the
Yeah.
And
spot.
especially if you're going out, if your intention is to go out to the public to assist with this list of questions, you gotta give them a couple days too.
Yeah.
So that if you
Well,
start
I'm
this
just
process
saying,
tomorrow.
I'm not going after, I guess, if people are listening, right, you're welcome to send your thoughts. I'm sure there are a lot of people in town that are interested in this, or experts. So if there's something that you feel like really you've read the proposals, send it to us. But we'll probably finalize this list in the next week,
Mhm.
and then we'll target the week of the 8th, I think, to have a meeting. No, have a meeting. December 8th. That's what I'm saying. We can get this list done in the next week, right? And then. Does that make sense?
I would have them come in the second of December.
Yeah, that's the week of the 8th, December 8th. Yeah. The second.
Yeah, second week. We have a meeting scheduled the 9th, but this would probably need its own meeting, don't you think?
Yeah, or we could turn that into just primarily academy. If we don't have a lot of business, we could just make that. If we have a meeting on the 9th, maybe we just do that.
That's the morning meeting.
Mhm.
Oh, that's the one.
Yeah.
No, it's the morning meeting, forget it. It'll be.
We don't have morning meetings yet.
No, that's
January, sorry.
No, I'm getting very excited and.
No, it's gotta be a night meeting, so we'll we'll figure out dates, target it in the evening. And is everybody good with that then?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the positive thing is we had some interest, right? And we knew that we weren't even sure if we were gonna get any proposals, and I think it's been interesting that we got something different than what, I kind of assumed we'd probably get some housing. And we got something different to think about that could be really exciting, but it also has a lot of like challenges to it as well. So, but I think it's worth, this next step. So if everybody is that, I think that's something else on here.
Well,
I guess
I
we
mean, I
got
think,
citizens' comments.
but I think we really want to thank the 4 respondents
Yes,
too. I mean,
yes.
bottom line, like, this is something that's
Yeah.
going to benefit our town and make our town better.
Yeah.
So I'm a super appreciation of what everybody went through to put through these amazing ideas. I mean, we're grateful. So thank you.
Although to be fair, it's an alternative to the demolition.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't
You
want to
had,
see this as.
you
a
had to go
complete-
glass half empty, did you?
I know, but to present it.
I was trying to end on things that you went.
We've got 5 options in front of us, not 4.
I'm with.
Yeah, that's it, that's the only true and fair way to present it to the public, is not to say, yes, thank you. But we can't say it's gonna make our town better, because we don't know if that's what they're gonna vote on.
No, but I
You know.
think the other thing too, I think there's a bit of social media buzz out there, right? About, tear it down and put up a park, it's that song, right? At the end of the day, that's not even an option on the table at this point, that a park is even an option. So I think to me, you're right. 5 options, one of them is demolition, but going to the next step of creation of a park requires a design and all sorts of other things. So
Yeah.
I'm not going down that path yet.
Right.
Yeah,
And I think though, one of the things we have to step back, the reason that we're just agonizing over this is it's in our historic district. It's a historic building. If there's
Yes.
something unique there, do we really want to be tearing down something that they don't build anymore? That was Michael's first comment. These don't, they don't build like this. So I think
We need to be
that's the
sure.
passion that where you have to come in and say, what can we do to save this, right? And so that's, at the end of the day, though, we have to be pragmatic too. So we're gonna have to make a pragmatic decision. But we have to listen and explore this, I think, because it's something special. That building is a special building. And its location in particular makes it even more special. And which is why I think it was hard to see the community center concept not be successful, because it did provide economic development, and it kept it in public hands and public control. So, but we have to move on from that, and that's why I think we did this expression of interest process. So that is front and center in my mind. It's that preservation mode that we gotta continue. We just gotta start. The more we tear these things down, the more we're gonna miss having them as part of our history. And next year is our 200th anniversary. I mean, do we really want to be tearing down this beautiful building in our downtown historic district as a symbol of our 200th anniversary? So that is a question we're gonna have to all ask ourselves. So,
Well, our motto
Yeah.
is yesterday and beyond, or whatever, some version.
Before and
of that.
beyond.
So, moving
before and
forward,
beyond, right? So that's our,
saving something because it's old.
no, it's on the historic registry. It's not just old. There's a lot, I tore down our corn crib in our yard. It had been there probably over 100 years. We hated to do it, but it was rotted to the core and it was unsafe. Right? And so there was a point where you had to let it go. I don't think we're at that point with this building. I really don't. So, but that's my personal opinion, and I think we'll see where this, it's ultimately not my decision, right? It's the public's decision. So,
Right, but to Jen's point, our role is to present fairly the real options that are out there.
right,
Um,
feasible, realistic, viable options that can be done.
And so the public conversation has to.
Yes.
But I don't think anybody's ever suggested we wouldn't have a public conversation either. So I think that's the whole point of this process, is to do it fairly. And to bring the best option forward. You're sparking.
All right, well, I know, to be continued,
Yeah,
right?
we have
I mean, we're gonna. Academy is always an interesting topic. So, so I think with that, we should probably open it up to citizens' comments. So I know we have members of the public here, and some people online. And so we will ask people to be brief, 2 minutes, state your name and address, just because we might have a number of people who want to speak. So I ask you to be mindful of keeping your comments brief, and you're always welcome to send things via email in a much more detailed, fashion that you'd like to do that. So, okay, so we have, we'll do the in the room, and then if there are hands raised on, then we'll go to online. So. please state your name and address.
Guilford just finished, so.
Name and address.
Bruce Lockhart, Indigo Trail, Madison. Guilford just finished a project of 6 affordable houses. It got to be such a boondoggle, the state had to come in and drop $250,000 per unit to finish it because the contractor could not bring the 6 houses in at a cost that people could afford the affordable housing. I think if the state is mandating that we, the town of Madison, have X amount of affordable houses, this building represents the one chance that we can put in numerous affordable units and start to meet that mandate from the state. So my idea is to, yes, it is a beautiful building. Probably shouldn't have been be torn down. But if we have to, if we're mandated by the state to have affordable housing, this unit represents the best chance to keep the structure as it is, to keep the historic district as it is, and then to have affordable housing for the people of Madison, new people or existing people that can move into it. But the idea of a hotel, we're going to go into the hotel business by giving somebody $9 million. What if the hotel fails? A lot of hotels are shutting down. So now we're stuck with a building that's built as a hotel and in the hole for $8 million. Wow, we're not in the hotel business.
Thank you for your comment. Any other people in the room? Raise your hand if you want to make a public comment. Yes, please.
Catherine Hunter, 21 Center Village. I'm actually in shock. We are all the way back to 2017. I think the amount of selective amnesia on the board is amazing. Bruce was there, Al was there, Scott was there, Peggy, you weren't. But the public outcry at that time was there were no community options, and the Banish administration was running the train down the tracks with private development. And the tension became, do we want to make money from a historic building in our historic village district? Or do we want to hold on to this building and this amenity and preserve what the center of our town is? 400 people came to Polson. And Bruce, you spearheaded the effort to form a committee to survey, not a group of 4 or 5 people deciding what the town wanted, but a survey that would be done by an impartial professional organization to actually figure out what the town direction was. It's very upsetting to hear that whatever anybody wanted in 2017 doesn't matter anymore, and what you heard in the second referendum matters. I'd like to know what happened to the first referendum. It passed, it's still out there. It's $16 million to build a community center. Has it legally disappeared? Are all the people who voted for a community center and preservation of this asset disregarded? The second referendum did not nullify the first referendum. The second referendum, I don't believe, was a mandate against community use. The second referendum said loud and clear, we don't want to spend $24 million on something you told us would cost $16 million. And we don't think this administration can get it right. If you're only after money, put a Costco in, put a McDonald's in. Let's bring somebody in who will pay us the most for the land. A few other things that got said at this meeting, and forgive my frustration, but I've been at this for 10 years, and it's not Catherine Hunter who should decide what should happen, but it is also not 5 members of this board who should decide what should happen for the town. Did you float an RFP for a private community center? Did you float one for a swimming pool? Can you bring us what Scott mentioned, which is a proposal for demolition and hardscaping as a park? I want to remind you that in the run-up to the second referendum, when you were going to go to the town and many people said, you know, this won't pass. Nobody goes back for a second bite of the apple once you've got a hard-fought project like this on the table and passed. When you were going back, you said it won't wipe out the first referendum. Joan Walker talked about it all the time. You'll still have it. People asked, would you bring us a park? Would you bring us a park proposal? Would you bring us Plan B? That wasn't there. Come on. I mean, I don't know what's happening here.
You've had your 2 minutes, so I appreciate that.
Let me just wrap up. I don't know what's happening here. And I have a lot of respect for how hard you all work. And I don't follow the online conspiracy theories about how planned out or conspiratorial this all was. But Academy should not have failed. The center should not have failed. And I really hope before you go too far down the road on this, you will at least consider some community proposals such as demolition in a park and put that out there so that you can gauge how much interest there still is in preserving this asset. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Any questions or further comments in the room? So we'll go online. Jeannie, I don't know if there are any hands raised. Actually, I'm looking here.
Yes,
So,
there are.
Go ahead.
David. David Kademus, you're muted.
David Kademus, Chair of the Facilities Committee in the town. I would just urge that this kind of decision is not made in a vacuum of Academy by itself. Our committee is working to develop a long-range master plan that includes an array of housing, both affordable workforce, low, middle income and upper income housing, commercial spaces, as well as arts and other kinds of support to the community for schools, et cetera. So within that context, I would hope that any process on the review of Academy is at least incorporates the Facilities Committee as a important commenter to help drive that decision in a coordinated way with all the other assets that we're looking at for the town.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Any other hands raised online?
No.
Okay, well, there'll be, obviously, this is gonna be a very robust conversation. This is the first of many discussions, so there'll be other opportunities for people to participate. And I guess with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. All right, thank you. Thank you for-